These 6 countries are currently experiencing some of the worst economic crisis the world has ever seen, and it's not an exaggeration to say that one of them will completely collapse in the very near future, and Argentina provides a prime illustration of this. Argentina, a once promising economy, has been plagued with economic turmoil in recent years. The country has struggled to stabilize its economy, with high inflation rates, a fluctuating currency, and a high debt-to-GDP ratio. The current economic crisis has been brewing for years and has now reached a tipping point, with the country's citizens feeling the devastating effects. With inflation skyrocketing to over 100% last month, the cost of living has doubled in just 1 year, pushing nearly 40% of the population below the poverty line. Food and beverages were identified as the category of items that were most affected as inflation increased by 6.6% in February alone. As if that wasn't enough, homelessness is on the rise as the system fails to support those in need, and unemployment is picking up again, erasing any recent gains. But the root of the problem lies in Argentina's staggering debt, which stands at a daunting $174 billion. The government's struggles to repay a $57 billion IMF bailout from 2018 have left foreign investors and the public skeptical about their ability to navigate the storm. As a result, foreign investors are becoming less likely to provide much-needed assistance, and domestically, the situation has wreaked havoc on the country's politics. Various social movements and organizations have repeatedly protested due to this situation. For example, on August 17, 2022, labor unions, social movements, and left-wing political parties marched through the center of Buenos Aires to demonstrate against the economic crisis and rising poverty. With so much at stake, the real question is whether the country can avoid bankruptcy and find a way out of this mess. Over in West Africa, we have Nigeria. Nigeria has been facing an economic crisis in recent years, which has been largely driven by a combination of factors such as a decline in oil prices, weak economic policies, corruption, insecurity, and a lack of diversification of the economy. But none of this is the main culprit of current Nigeria's economic turmoil, but instead its currency redesign. Nigeria is in the midst of a dire crisis that has left over half of its population without access to money. Imagine going to the market and finding it virtually deserted, with nobody able to pay for anything. Imagine waiting in line for hours just to get enough money to last the day. This is the reality for many Nigerians as the country has run out of paper notes. The crisis began when the government made the bold decision to replace all of the highest denomination notes in their currency. However, the government had not made nearly enough of the new notes, and people were given just 3 months before the old notes became worthless. As a result, there was an immediate rush to get the new notes, leaving many people without any money at all. This crisis has had a devastating impact on the private sector, with growth coming to a standstill for the first time in 3 years. Poverty rates in Nigeria are on the rise, with an estimated 133 million Nigerians living in poverty. Corruption is rampant, with an estimated 170 million bribes paid in Nigeria every year. The government's decision to go cashless was part of a misguided plan to address Nigeria's endemic corruption problem. However, it has only made things worse, as corruption continues to thrive as many people are being forced to literally buy the new Naira notes, and corruption continue to remain rampant even at the highest level of the government. Another problem gripping Nigerians is fuel scarcity, with many people reportedly spending more than 10 hours just to fill their cars. In a country with abundant reserve of oil, this really shouldn't be happening. The main contributing factor to these fuel shortages is corruption, as the subsidized oil is reportedly being sold to other countries in order to make an insane amount of money. Sadly, at the expense of every Nigerian. The only fortunate thing about the current Nigeria's economic crisis is that it may be the easiest to fall back from this self-implicated crisis among all the countries we will be discussing. Before we move on, we will very much appreciate it if you give this video a like and subscribe to our channel. Unfortunately, Lebanon's case is a more serious one. Lebanon has been in a downward spiral of crisis for years, leaving 80% of its population in poverty. Clean water scarcity has reached such an alarming level that the occurrence of shortages has become normal, resulting in one of the most severe cholera epidemics witnessed in decades. The current crisis is the worst the country has ever faced, with the collapse of its currency and the government's recent devaluation of it by 90%. Things have gotten so bad that as of making this video, $1 is equivalent to a staggering 15,011 Lebanese pounds. The banks have also been blocking people from withdrawing their savings without taking a significant portion of it, leaving citizens with no choice but to resort to drastic measures to reclaim what's rightfully theirs. So, why has Lebanon's economy been pushed to the brink of collapse? The elites in Lebanon blame external factors such as the war in neighboring Syria and the COVID-19 pandemic. However, according to World Bank, Lebanon's financial crisis was a deliberate depression caused by the financial elite, who likened their actions to a Ponzi scheme. The government made hollow promises to investors in exchange for massive loans, constantly propping up the currency's value with further loans. When the war and pandemic hit, investors became more cautious, leading to the scheme's collapse, and Lebanon's people were left to pick up the pieces. Adding to this tragedy was the deadly Beirut explosion of 2020, where corrupt port officials overlooked the dangerous dumping of explosives, leading to hundreds of deaths and thousands of injuries. The situation has become so dire that Lebanon is now seeking a multi-billion-dollar bailout package from the IMF. However, without massive reforms and concrete plans in place, the crisis is only set to continue, and the future of Lebanon is looking incredibly bleak. The next country that is in a serious economic mayhem is South Africa. South Africa is facing some of its toughest challenges in decades, and it's no surprise to say that inequality is the biggest problem gripping the nation, considering how the world has never been an equal place. That said, South Africa inequality is on a whole other level, with some saying South Africa is the most unequal place in the world. It's so bad that it's estimated that the wealthiest 10% own more than 85% of household wealth, while 3,500 of the richest South Africans earn more than the poorest 32 million combined. It's no wonder that over half of the country's population is struggling to make ends meet. Unemployment rate is through the roof, with over 60% of young South Africans unable to find work. With no hope for a brighter future, many young South Africans are turning to violent crime to survive. Gang warfare and violence have become a way of life, making the country gaining the reputation for being one of the world's most dangerous countries. The country's education system hasn't been left out of this chaos, unfortunately, which is why it has been estimated that more than a quarter of children who have been in school for over 6 years can't even read. Can you imagine the devastating impact this will have on their ability to navigate the challenges of tomorrow? All of these systemic issues have taken their toll on the economy, and economists are now predicting yet another recession in South Africa this year, on top of the already disastrous economic situation. South Africa is in the grip of a devastating economic crisis, and the root cause is a pervasive and insidious corruption that has seeped into every level of society. The most blatant examples of this corruption can be seen at the very top, where powerful companies like Eskom have engaged in gross incompetence and embezzlement to line their pockets at the expense of the country's infrastructure and people. The energy grid has been left in tatters, with frequent and prolonged blackouts becoming a way of life for many South Africans. These blackouts, which they refer to as load shedding, can last for 12 hours, affecting almost every business you can think of. Sadly, corruption has become so ingrained in South African society that those in power seem more interested in jostling for petty political power than fixing the problems that plague their country. Even top executives aren't safe, as evidenced by the poisoning of a former CEO of Eskom who was fired after denying corruption charges. But despite the overwhelming sense of despair, there are those who are fighting back. Babita Deokaran, a public servant who dedicated her career to rooting out corruption, was instrumental in uncovering a corrupt scheme that siphoned off millions of dollars from hospital resources. Tragically, she paid the ultimate price for her bravery, gunned down in broad daylight with no protection from the government she had served. Over in North Africa, Tunisia is also in a serious economic chaos. The country's economy has been struggling due to a lack of structural reforms, political instability, corruption, and inefficient public institutions. Tunisia has also been facing challenges in attracting foreign investment, which has further limited its ability to generate economic growth. Tunisia is on the brink of an economic disaster. The country's public debt, which was already at a staggering 70% of its GDP, has skyrocketed to nearly 90% in just a matter of years. As a result, poverty rates have spiked to over 15%, leaving Tunisians struggling to get by. And to make matters worse, the country is now facing severe shortages of essential supplies like fuel, flour, and sugar. It's no wonder that people are asking, who will come to Tunisia's aid in this time of crisis? Unfortunately, Tunisia's democratic ideals have been cast aside since the revolution in 2011, And the new dictator in power has been cracking down on political opponents and arresting people critical of the regime on social media. The recent political instability has led to mass protests and strikes, bringing the economy to a standstill. The government's solution to the crisis is a hard and long austerity program that will cut crucial subsidies for clean drinking water, leading to a 23% increase in water prices nationwide. Overall spending on subsidies will be slashed by 26.4%, while taxes will rise by 12.5%. Although the IMF has approved an emergency loan of $1.8 billion, delays and a lack of tourism money have made it challenging to implement these reforms. As Tunisia's credit rating is downgraded again, it is becoming increasingly difficult to secure new loans. The country is dangerously close to bankruptcy, and whether the new autocratic government will survive this crisis is anyone's guess. The situation in Tunisia is dire, and urgent action is needed to prevent an economic catastrophe. As bad as things looking in Tunisia, Pakistan's economic situation is much direr. Picture a country on the brink of collapse, with fuel shortages leading to the closure of businesses and mass job losses. This is the reality for Pakistan, where over 1,600 textile mills have shut down, leaving 5 million people without work. With unemployment soaring and wages stagnant, inflation has reached a staggering 40%, with basic commodities like onion going up 370%, eggs by 81%, leaving millions struggling to afford basic necessities like food, shelter, and medical care. And if that wasn't enough, devastating floods have displaced 8 million people, further exacerbating the crisis. But the root of the problem lies in Pakistan's massive debt, which has been growing at an alarming rate for the past 25 years and is currently at around $194 billion. This debt now threatens to strangle the economy, leaving the government dangerously low on cash with only $3 billion left to support a population of over 230 million people. To be clear, that's less than $15 per person. To make matters worse, the IMF's bailout plan demands harsh measures like tax increases and fuel price hikes, which could further destabilize the country. Former Prime Minister Imran Khan has been leading protests against the government, demanding fundamental rights for the people. But the current regime is cracking down on protesters, even issuing an arrest warrant for Khan himself. With mass poverty, political upheaval, and a government in turmoil, Pakistan is teetering on the edge of collapse, and the implications could be catastrophic. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel for more content like this.